Yeah, I'm really scared.
Muzongo TV.
About to hop in the plane. Some shots of Cabrera. This is our pilot, Frank.
This is Ryan, sorry. He's one of our mechanics.
It was just a short 30-minute flight, but Rob was always a little bit anxious about planes. But after a few minutes, he started to actually enjoy himself.
As soon as we took off, it felt like I was on a roller coaster and I couldn't help but just start smiling my ass off. It was just so much fun just taking off and everything and hanging out the door, getting all that footage, and then we saw some animals down below, which is the first wildlife we'd seen in Africa.
Cabrera looked so vast, and it was just, in some ways such a hard sight to see, but in such ways such a beautiful sight to see, all the different textures and colors of the slum.
Did 3 passes, and then all of a sudden we started to get lower, and before we took off, the pilot had told us that he was going to do something that enabled us to get better shots, whether it's slow the engine down. I didn't really understand exactly, and so when we started losing altitude and the engine started slowing down, I thought that's what he was doing, so I wasn't worried about it. I was just like, wow, this is great shots.
One of the African guides with us got a phone call and turns around and says, the plane crashed. And I was like, are you kidding me? Are they okay, good, bad, not so good? Give me something at all, just tell me.
2 St. Louis filmmakers lived through a deadly plane crash in Africa.
When their single-engine Cessna crashed into a building and burst into flames.
Paris, pictured on the left, and Lair on the right, were flying over a slum near Nairobi when their plane went down.
There was that moment of, oh my God, this is bad, and then 2 seconds later, which felt like an eternity, we hit the power lines.
Just bam, 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 bam. Just like we hit everything. It was like a roller coaster going off the tracks and just banging up against walls.
I opened my eyes and realized I was upside down. There's blood pouring down my face. There's fire around me. I have to get out of here. And I got out in probably 10 seconds, but it felt like forever.
And I remember waking up, and because I was hanging upside down, I felt like I was paralyzed. I felt like I couldn't move my legs.
And I got out and I looked back and there was no one else getting out, no one else moving. So I looked away and I looked back at the plane again and I basically thought, what you do right now matters.
Next thing I know, Rob was waking me up and he's like, the plane is on fire. The plane is on fire. You gotta get out. You gotta get out of here. And I'm just freaking out. And I look back and I turn around behind me and I just see flames coming in my direction.
He got out, walked out, and then I looked back again and then Frank and Ryan had not got out. And I said the same inner thing, like what you do right now matters. You're going back in there. And by that time, the fire was really starting to get bad.
And I look over and I watch Rob just run into the plane once. And then he runs back out and he kind of just stares at a second, then he's about to take off again.
I crawled back in and I remember seeing Ryan. He was strapped upside down too. And so I just started grabbing for a seatbelt. He's upside down, all his weight's holding that glass together. And I finally got it off. But right as I did, all the fire came up and just started burning my arm, and then my leg caught on fire. And so just instinctually, I just backed out of the plane for a second. And then as soon as I backed out, I planned on going back in, I don't know how, but just doing whatever it took. Somebody grabbed me and just pulled me away, and I just started screaming, we have to go back, we have to go back.
The next thing I know, these 2 African guys are just driving us to the hospital. And they get on the highway, but they get on the wrong side of the highway. So next thing you know, we're driving 50, 60 miles an hour on the wrong side of the highway, and cars are just swerving in and out of the way of us.
Me and Dan just survived the worst thing that's ever happened to us, and then now we have been thrown into the second worst thing that's ever happened to us, is driving the wrong way in traffic.
I was obviously, scared out of my mind for the lives of my friends, and just prayer was what I went to.
We made it to the hospital, and Rob jumped on the stretcher first. He was just kind of flipping out and freaking out and yelling the whole time.
I saw Dan over there, and he was in a lot worse condition than me, so I decided to take my neck brace off, take the thing that they put on my arm off, and say, don't work on me until you get Dan taken care of.
I could just like barely walk, barely stand up, and just made my way to a stretcher. And then I remember just for like the next 9 or 10 hours, just, you know, strapped down with a neck brace on, and all I could see was the ceiling, you know, and like people would come up above me and just like look at me like just kind of freaked out.
I walked over to him and I pulled out my phone and I just started filming, and we just talked, and Dan recalled the event and I started crying, and I think we both cried.
Like constant pain, just a good steady pain in my lower back. I don't want to move and I can't stop thinking about it. But I think I'm gonna be okay. We were out trying to get the guy, but he didn't come out, and 2 people dragged us. And I figured there were so many people there that those guys would be helped by somebody who could actually move, and I wasn't freaking out. I hope they got help.
It was incredible to see my friends alive, I would definitely say.
I remember David come over and hold my hand and me crying as I talked to him.
I leaned over Dan, I grabbed his hand, and just met his eyes. He couldn't really look down or around too much, so I just got right over him. So I wanted him to know, and that I was just there for him, and I would do anything for him. Like I was just there, just to like hear everything they had to say, to be there for him, just so that he knew, you know, that I was there for no matter what, like right there in that moment. And I would do nothing else. Nothing else mattered at all other than him. I just wanted him to feel that comfort.
And I was like, this is when I die. But I was gonna die.
The pilot of the plane was an American who did missionary work. He was killed in the crash.
This guy, he was 35 years old. 4 kids. And a wife.
The family emails us hoping that his death is not in vain.
Right now, the project is delayed, but the families say it will continue.
So what does it take to make a difference? For us, it almost took everything. Because of the crash, Rob had to get 6 stitches in his head and had several burns all over his body. I was a good bit worse, with a compression fracture in my back, a broken collarbone, and unknown intestinal injuries. We were both alive though, but unfortunately neither Frank, the pilot, nor Ryan, the mechanic, ended up surviving. I remember hearing that Frank had passed away, and then I remember a week later hearing that Ryan had passed away and just crying right there, just thinking like, you know, 2 of us lived, 2 of us died. Like, why us 2?
And I just knew right then this is gonna affect you in ways that you're not even gonna imagine.
He spent the next few days in the hospital, but eventually had to leave.
It sucked to leave Dan, but like I just knew for my own mental health that I had to go.
After Rob left the hospital, I spent another week there in lots of pain. For several days I could not go to the bathroom, and then for several days I could not stop. I had to slowly start walking off my back injury and got out of the hospital as soon as I felt like I could walk on my own.
Pretty good, man.
Hey.
I spent 5 days in the hospital in the US, and it seemed like they had fixed my problem and I started to have normal bowel movements.
Only issues I've had so far was on the plane, taking off from land.
Yeah, it's kind of little things, but they put me on edge of my bed and put me in a really bad mood.
Are you still like taking any medicine or anything?
Yeah, I have to take, I can't sleep without my Xanax. Like, I'm not even gonna try. Because I'll just have some, like, I have little anxiety attacks constantly.
So after I got home from Africa, everything was just a little bit off. Driving in a car just set me off. Seeing planes set me off. Seeing fire set me off. I just was on edge constantly for about a couple weeks. And for a while, I just didn't know how to handle it, and so I pretty much turned into a recluse and just backed away from the world.
Before leaving the hospital in Africa, we all agreed that instead of postponing the journey, David and Tim would continue our planned path through Africa and keep living on $1.25 a day.